call the meeting to order at 7:06. Is there any public comment? Okay. First discussion item is the budget with corresponding revenue and tax sheets. So Tara sent out the most recent version. Do you want to speak to that, Tara, or you want me to summarize?
So on the expenditure budget, what has been updated is we had received the 6-semester vocational averages from the state, so we've updated the on behalf of on both the revenue and the expense, and as you recall, that zeroes each other out. So that's been updated using the FY26 6-semester average and the FY26 rate that the agency pays to the vocational districts on behalf of White River Unified District. And at the last SU board meeting, the SU budget for central office and for special education were both approved along with the assessments for FY26. So each of those line items have been updated. And then preschool, we received from the state the preschool tuition rate for FY26. So that's also been updated on both the revenue and the expense side.
Staffing status quo from what you saw in previous versions.
Yep. So the expenditure budget currently sits at a 6.25% increase, which equates to $899,287. Any questions on that before we move to revenue? I don't see anything from Nancy or Rodney. So on the revenue side, what I've done so far is you'll see we've increased the tuition number of students to 50 students, and we're currently using our recommended FY26 announced tuition rate. So that adjustment's been made there, and I already discussed that I adjusted the tuition for preschool and the tech center on behalf of. So those are the only changes on the revenue sheet. Any questions on the revenue before we move to tax? Nancy's got her hand up, Andrew.
Oh, go ahead, Nancy.
I thought that we had agreed on 19,000 something for the tuition rate.
You had for this current year, when we ran the initial figures on the worksheet, it was showing at a much less recommended announced tuition rate. That's why Tara sent you a second set of the announced tuition worksheets,
Okay.
which has a higher
I
number.
guess I did pick up on it.
And so then we need to decide tonight what number we're actually going to announce at.
Yep, and then that will be updated, Nancy. Whatever you announce your tuition at tonight, I will update the revenue sheet to be reflective of that.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So on the tax sheet, the first part of the formula hasn't changed. So we still take your total expenditure budget, we back out your offsetting revenue, and that gets us to your Act 68 education spending. And I'm starting in the top left corner, if that's helpful for you. So the Act 68 education spending comes to $13,842,458. We divide that by the long-term weighted average, and this sheet is still using version 3. We did receive version 5 today. We're just reviewing the numbers to verify that they're in fact accurate. So we're still using version 3.
But just so the board knows, that was a positive figure.
So it went up?
It went up a couple students.
Yep.
Yes. It's not negative.
Lock it in. Stop verifying.
Well, that's what the
I
whole-
think they're going to lock this version.
Okay, good.
So the request is going to be that, once it's verified, that superintendents sign off and authorize that it's the accurate long-term weighted average by the 17th.
So you probably should actually look it over again.
Yeah. So we're trying to make sure, just that everything's good.
That's good. That's great, though.
Yep.
But yeah, I didn't want you thinking it was going in the
Yeah.
other direction.
No, we're good.
Yeah, no, that's what I was worried about. So, you think it's like one,
It
11,
is,
15.
if
Was it
it's accurate, it's
117?
1,117.59, if it's accurate.
okay, I forgot to
So we take that Act 68 education spending, we divide it by the long-term weighted ADM of that one, what, right now we're using that 1,113.14. And that gives us our education spending per pupil cost of $12,435.50. And the excess spending threshold comes back into play this year. So that is $15,926. So we're well below the threshold. So then we take the education spending per pupil cost and we divide that by your yield, which hasn't changed. We're still using that 12-1 yield of 8,553. So that gives us the district's equalized residential tax rate of 1.4539. And tax department did increase the non-residential tax rate. It went from 1.391 to 1.791. So that's represented in that top left box. And now we move to the individual town information. So we take the district-wide equalized tax rate of 1.4539, and we divide that by the common level of appraisal. And so this is where our formula changed this year. This is where the statewide common level of appraisal now comes into effect. So your Bethel's actual CLA was that 67.26. And with the statewide CLA, it increases Bethel's CLA to 92.95%. So again, we divide that equalized tax rate by the CLA, and then that gives us the Bethel projected homestead tax rate, which is 1.5642, which would be an increase of 5.8 cents over current year. And then we do the same thing on the Royalton side. And Royalton CLA went down from 79.44 to 71.85. And then we add in the statewide CLA, where you divide the CLA by the statewide CLA, and that gives us the 99.30. So the Royalton homestead projected tax rate would be 1.4642, which is a reduction of 5.6 cents over the current tax rate. So that's where we sit currently on the tax sheet. So again, any additional changes that happen to the long-term weighted average, if there's any changes to the yield, that will in fact impact the equalized tax rate, which then impacts our final projected property tax rates for the individual towns.
So the reason why we're showing a decrease in Royalton and an increase in Bethel still is due to the difference in the CLA. Royalton being at 99.3 and Bethel being at 92.95.
Mostly that Bethel dropped 13 points and Royalton dropped 8. That was
Yes,
the big difference.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because it's mostly the change in the CLA that affects how the tax rate change happens. And just a quick comment on that statewide CLA division thing. It makes it look like our CLA goes up, but the yield basically is being adjusted in the same proportion that the statewide CLA adjusts our CLA. So it kind of cancels it out, but makes it, I don't know, I like it better.
Me too. And they did increase. It's one of the higher non-residential rates that we've
Yeah.
gotten in the December 1 tax letter in some time.
And it
So,
had already gone up a fair amount last year.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I have for you tonight so far in the budget.
And just so board knows, just a reminder, Tara does a nice job of showing you this. At this point, aside from gaining some pupils, which we hope to do, which will have a positive impact on your tax rate, in order for us to make a change of 1 cent, we need to either increase revenue by $95,206.86 or decrease expenses by $95,206.86. Or it can be a
Percent,
combination
yeah.
of the both,
Yep.
which Tara has on the right-hand side there. Very nice, Calvin. Good job highlighting that. Appreciate it.
You just tell me what the latest version of the long-term weighted average was again.
1,117.59.
Great, thank you. Does anybody have any comments on any of those things? Any things you'd like to see changed? What do you think about the overall level currently? Anybody want to start?
Looks very similar to last year. We've got a negative for Norrielton's tax base and a small positive adding on to Bethel's. I think that this is appropriate. I think this is quite defensible.
Yeah, I would say, so the 1.5642 after the CLA and FY '22, Bethel was 1.5636, so it's been lower the last couple years, but we have in the recent past been at that level before. So, you know, it's not like we're increasing it over what, you know, they're unprecedentedly, you know what I mean? There were a couple of things in the budget itself I was curious about. One, and I forget if I brought this up last time, because I made a note and then I think I forgot. In the regular ed instruction, 641, books and periodicals, last year we put $50,000 in to purchase the literacy materials, I think.
Some math upgrades. and
Math
literacy.
upgrades, that's
Both. We did a little bit of both. We
Right.
would have put that in there for
And
We'd like
then
to have some of that.
bridges.
bridges, right? That's right. So that was supposed to be $50,000 of one-time money. It went down 9,000, but I was curious, you know, if we're doing another major purchase or if that is what we expect. Like, why would we expect it to be there as opposed to kind of where it was previous to last year?
Not another major purchase, other than there are some consumables that we'll need to purchase. And their hope is to continue to extend our literacy work specific to, we've done a lot of purchasing in your primary grades for foundational literacy work, like foundations materials, Haggerty's materials. We have not purchased anything specific for your teachers in grades 4 through 8 to support the science of reading. So there's a placeholder there. We haven't settled on what we want to purchase yet. But teachers have been exploring a couple of different programs that tied to the science of reading.
Okay.
What we've used in some other districts, and we're collecting data, is expeditionary learning, EL, which is tied to the science of reading, which supports writing instruction and just continuing to increase our work around specifically spelling and coding for. But there hasn't been a final decision, so there, it is kind of there as a placeholder.
Okay.
And just to remind the board, like, it is not our practice, like, teachers will work with principals to decide what makes the most sense, as long as it's, you know, research-based materials, but we don't as an SU say, this is what we're using SU-wide. Hence why we haven't made a decision yet on what that literacy material might be.
Right. Does anybody else have anything else they want to bring up at this point? I kind of think I might, you know, there, we talked a bit about it last time where the transfer to the building fund was increased by 40,000. You know, I kind of would rather see that happen maybe next year and just keep it at the regular level for this year. I understand the thought behind it, but, you know, just with,
We got the Mongo coming too. Yeah.
what's that? Yeah, we got the
we could-
bond vote
yes, right.
and, yeah. So it'd be good to kind of see what happens there. And then I guess the other thing that would impact the tax rate would be our tuition level, which we can talk about in a bit.
So we're gonna remove,
What's that?
you want us to remove the 40,000?
Yeah. What does everybody else think about that? So what we're talking about is
The,
on the last page of the budget, I think it is.
yep, page 11 of 11 at the top. Last line of that first section, the building reserve transfer, you'll see that $40,000 increase over in the difference column. Because we increased it from 40,000 to 80,000 to be more in line with our capital improvements plan.
So that'd be a little less than half a cent, like 0.4 cents or something like that. Make a little bit of a difference. 0.04 cents? Oh, 0.4 cents. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay.
Yeah, that does seem like a pretty substantial increase.
I know it'd be difficult to do, but it would be great to be able to have like a short summary that would say, you know, like break down, this is the increase in expenses, and like have brief summaries. You know, we try and do this for the presentations each time of like, this was, you know, $50,000 for books and $400,000 for health insurance, and, you know, like have that kind of summary. I haven't had a chance to really go through and categorize what, because when we're looking at it in this, like a lot of it kind of lumps together of like some of the health insurances are up and some are down, and like what does it net out to as far as the total health insurance cost increase, and how much of this is, you know, the school-based clinician, and, you know, it's helpful to kind of be able to think about it in that way. So I don't know if it's be possible to get a little summary that would have that. But everybody else is comfortable with the way the budget is currently? Okay. So I guess we'll look to take action on it at our regular board meeting next Tuesday. If there's, you know, things that you think of in the next week, you can send a note to Tara, and she can give us options that we can decide between.
The only other area that we may be able to adjust a little is Tri-Valley Transit. We've been surveying our students in regards to how they're best utilizing that, and it appears to be that at this point, mostly around, we were able to add the third bus back to Bethel finally to get fully staffed there this year. So we're not relying on Tri-Valley Transit to have to provide tuition transportation over to the valley in regards to Granville, Hancock, Rochester, where we were having to rely on them some last year because we were short a driver. So I think we're gonna, my advice is gonna be that we consider budgeting to prioritize Tri-Valley specific to the routes that run from campus to campus, because that's where our ridership is the highest, is students utilizing it back and forth. Now that we have, you know, all of our fleet up and running now through STA, I don't see a need for us to have to supplement our tuition routes. Other than the route that goes to Stratford, and there's a chance actually that Tri-Valley itself might discontinue that route. That's the only tuition town we have coming in that we don't actually provide a yellow bus for right now, is to go to Stratford, but Tri-Valley does provide transportation over to that. It's called the Thetford Connector. So we may be able to lower that figure a little bit too before next week.
What line was that in again?
So that's also on page 11 of 11. If you go about halfway down, it's 2790 is the function code, other student transportation.
Right,
You'll see
okay.
over in the notes where it says Tri-Valley Transit.
So I've asked for a quote of what they would quote us to do the between campus, and keep Stratford Connector in.
What, I mean, I know some of the, like, the Rochester in the morning, like, that's just part of our regular route, but like, what is the cost difference between a full bus versus one of these Tri-Valley Transits?
Tri-Valley is way cheaper.
Yeah. So is there a reason
Way
why we're
cheaper,
trying to do
well,
that?
because it's not always convenient to our tuition kids.
Oh, okay.
Like, you have to use the public runs, and the timings are not as conducive.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's what they run for public, there's no adjustments, right? So kid may need to get on in Chelsea, for example, at, 6:40, when a yellow bus leaves at like 7:15 to get them to the high school.
Right.
And so that is why we were estimating ridership, like we tried to promote it, but kids are choosing not to be on the public transportation. They're all utilizing the yellow bus.
And most of those, we're able to have those be kind of at the start of one of our.
Yeah.
other
I
routes
would
anyway.
say that you wouldn't eliminate a full route anyways, yeah. Because they're picking up, the kids the bus we use from Chelsea, we use on the 110 corridor too, and does some other loop around your town.
So is the money that we have in the budget basically just paying their fares so they're able to ride free, or,
No, it's a community partner, so they're charging us as a community partner to add us to their stops.
okay, so it's more that they come to our
Yeah,
spot? Okay.
exactly.
Got it. And you were saying that we're doing like after school, does
Yeah,
that
we
mean
just
like-
added a run now, so we've got a run that runs after clubs here in Bethel, so at believe it's 4:30, they go to Royalton, and now we have a bus that's leaving Royalton to come to Bethel at 5:15.
Is that Tri-Valley Transit or,
Mhm.
okay.
Yep.
But we're keeping those and.
I want to keep those, it's
Yeah.
way better cost-wise to keep those in
Yeah, and
place.
it
and then
seems
we
like
have
there's
them.
not that many kids that do it.
So,
too,
yeah,
so.
it's more about just trying to figure out where it made the most sense cost-wise and also meet our kids' needs.
Right. Do they do anything for do those continue on to any of the tuitioning areas?
They do
after?
currently right now, yes.
That's good.
Yep.
Okay.
So
Well,
then
that's
the
good.
other change also that will come is what the decision is on the bond,
Right,
because that is not incorporated in this budget at this point in time.
right. So whatever interest for this year would come from the bond, which likely would be a half year of interest, would wind up adding on to this if we do that. But we're not thinking, like, that would just, we just have that. I mean, do we want to add that to the budget and then? Or is it just?
It's
as it
tricky due to
happens?
the timing of your vote. I'm having the same issue with our other district that's gonna
Right.
vote on town meeting day, because I think some people are gonna feel like you just asked them to approve the bond by approving the budget in a
Right.
way, right? So I think that the timing's gonna be a bit tricky, because they'll vote on the bond on the Tuesday of town meeting,
And they vote on the budget.
and
then.
they'll vote on the budget then. I think one of the things we need to figure out and have a clear answer for you next week is there a way to construct the start of these jobs where if we're using capital funds, for example, for you, that we're not actually gonna need to actually take out and start collecting on the bond until later in the year, push that out as far as possible.
And unless I'm wrong, I think it'd probably be in the order of $80,000, which, we can hopefully have some surplus funds that would cover that anyway.
Yes, ideally.
Yeah, ideally. So, okay, so not putting it in the budget. Yeah,
I did pose that question today to legal, after my conversation with the bond bank, and because it has been asked by others, is if we could use our capital reserve funds to pay the first year of interest on the bonds.
It's a good, another strategy possibly too.
Yeah, so I am waiting on a legal opinion on that. Sometimes like capital reserves and then debt service, like they need to be different reserve funds, so I just wanted to get a legal opinion
Yeah.
on that before I put that out there as a total option. So I will let you know as soon as I hear from our bond attorney if that
Right.
is an option for us to do,
okay,
giving the timing of the situation.
right. That makes sense. Okay. All right, if we don't have anything else about the budget, then we'll move on to discussion. Do we want to do the tuition now?
We could, and then if Nancy leaves, then we could
So-
continue with the discussion. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Does Nancy need to go? We could go do the 2 action items.
Yeah, why don't we do the 2 action items? So we'll
There
start,
we go, Nancy, we got you.
start with the
Sorry.
announced tuition.
So
So, yeah, go ahead.
on the announced tuition, I did provide you the backup worksheets, which is how we get to the numbers. The finance committee, we had our meeting on Thursday. We made some adjustments as I outlined in the email, just based on dividing out some of the offsetting revenues on the tuition sheet. So in my memo, it's different than what it says on the revised, because I didn't update my memo. So right now, the elementary tuition recommendation per the worksheets is 16,885, and secondary, again, which is 7 through 12, is 21,960. But our recommendation is to go at 18.5, which was your FY '24 announced tuition rate. And that recommendation has to do with the current secondary tuition climate and what we're seeing with other districts, and potentially could be.
Well, we're worried about being billed back.
Right, right.
Will you explain what that means?
Yep, so when we announce our tuition and what our allowable tuition rate is, we're allowed a 3% swing. And if we are over or under, we have to either bill back or refund. We bill back for additional, or we have to refund any overpayments. So in FY '24, your announced tuition rate was 18.5 at both elementary and secondary, and we just got the allowable calculations back from the AOE. And for '24, for elementary, it was 11,788. And for secondary, it was 17,221 was your allowable tuition versus your announced tuition at 18.5. And that's based on the stat book data and the way the Agency of Education divides up the expenses for, because your middle school is combined, the agency does it based on your ADM and your enrollment in their formulas, because they have to break up your 5th and 6th grade, which is part of that middle school code, put it where it needs to be in the elementary, and then 7th and 8th is then included into your secondary.
We've also been drawing in more revenue and tuition than what we've been estimating, and so they take that into account.
Yep,
As they're gonna offset that as a revenue.
yep.
Like right now, we're budgeting 50, we expect that we could have as high as 80. And if that happens, they're gonna take that added revenue into their calculation around announced tuition figure. That's part of why we've also run into this problem.
Okay, thanks for explaining that.
So, I mean, certainly with the first calculation that we ran on the sheet, actually, prior to Tara meeting with your task force, showed like even a lower announced tuition than this 18.5. That was concerning to me, so that's why we came out with this recommendation from FY '24. I mean, I would say I'm still a bit leery about going certainly higher than your current 19.9, just because I don't want us to get to a situation where we need to then go back and pay people from prior years the difference in what our allowable is.
So I would like to, what I'm confused about, though, is that we're like the lowest tuition anywhere near us. And we're pretty low compared to everywhere in the state, at least last time I looked. So
I
does
mean, our
this mean?
tax rates have held more stable than most people around the state.
That's true, I suppose. But, I mean, that's partially because we are getting a lot of the weighting for the ADM. And in this case, for the stat books, they're not calculating the weighted ADM. They're
I would say
calculating
you're
just
getting
ADM.
part of the weighting for the ATM, and I mean,
And
as
we
we
do well with it,
as we
budget
showed,
says.
as your community engagement task force has shown, I mean, we have increased incoming revenue a great deal in regards to the amount of kids choosing you.
True, but that didn't really happen until,
It's happened in
like,
the last 2 years.
Right, so, I don't know.
listen, you can absolutely go where you want as a board. I just want to be on the
No,
record.
I just
like,
want to be able to
if-
understand, like, why.
And also, when you
know?
have an
I believe that,
increase-
I believe that our budget is not increasing at the rate of the rest of the state.
It's true.
Yep.
And I believe it's due to the fact that you are increasing enrollment at the secondary level around being able to draw in revenue, where those around you are actually losing that enrollment.
Right.
And I think that's resulting in a positive outlook. It's also why, like, if you look at the trajectory of districts around you, like, their tax rates are going up significantly more in general than our district is, meaning White River Unified District, if you look over the last 5 years.
Sure. I mean, I'd be curious to see, like, are the other towns getting lower than expected from their calculations as well? Like, or, because, I
I mean,
mean,
a good example is, right, Hartford had to reduce in force by 18 teachers last year. And
right, but I think
and
that had a lot more to do with the weighting. You know,
I
like,
don't think that was just waiting.
it wasn't just weighting, but it certainly was,
I think they
a lot.
added a lot of staff due to COVID funds,
sure.
and like their expenditures have increased significantly.
Right, I just have a hard time believing that that difference is like, 4,000.
You don't have to believe it. I
per-
believe most districts around us spend 4,000 more people than we
Yeah,
do.
maybe. Okay.
I'm not saying they're getting 4,000 more programming. I think that's why your kids are choosing to come here. I
Yeah,
just,
sure.
I think that that you have, as a board, done a really good job of building programming in a sustainable way. I do think we benefited from the pupils, absolutely, but I mean, an increase of 30 students is 600,000, like that's 6 FTE, and you haven't, we haven't had to add 6 FTE. So I think we've reaped some benefits from that. I think that's why our calculations are coming out lower.
Because we have more.
Right, but if
enrollment.
you look at our overall budget, like our net spending is up regardless. I mean, it's not like that's going down.
No, the net spending's up, but I would argue it's up a lot less than neighboring districts over time.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. And you guys have done a great job with that. It is, again, like I would have to look at the actual numbers and trends to see, it's a question of like what degree
Yeah.
difference that is.
Where I'm at with this is, as a board, I think you should announce the tuition that you want to announce. I just wanted it on record that I'm
Yep.
concerned.
Sure. I would, if you could send me whatever the state sent you for that calculation, I'd just be curious to look it over as well. Do they send you the, like, numbers that,
They
they
tell me
used-
what my allowable tuition is based on my stat books.
right,
So I get a report of what my allowable tuition rate is.
okay. If you wouldn't mind sharing that report, I'd love to see it. Thank you. Well, what do people want to do? So we were at 19.9 last year. I've generally thought it's been good to be lower than the surrounding towns to help our SU mates and kind of become an attractive destination. When seeing the 18.5 as a recommendation, my thoughts were that I don't want to go that low, like if, I could see going lower with our tuition, and that would, again, be like $3,000 or $4,000 lower than any of the surrounding towns, which would be a great benefit for our surrounding communities. I could see doing that if we became like a designated town, where, it wasn't just like, because I don't know how much parents, when they're choosing, look at our tuition rate as an argument for sending to us or not. So I don't know how much, I like the idea of helping out our surrounding districts so that they can, push us as a destination as a general policy, but, I don't know that it's going to influence individual families as much.
No, I just want to be really clear with the board. My worry
Right.
is not that. My worry is we announce a tuition that's larger than our allowable, and we have to pay those districts back.
So what was the FY, so the FY '24 was 17 something.
Yep, so in 24, the announced versus allowable, announced was 18.5 and allowable was 17,221.
What was the announced and allowable in FY '23?
Announced in 23 was 17.8. I don't have your allowable with me.
But presumably it was,
We were okay that year.
Yeah,
right.
I don't have the specific number with me.
Yeah, no, I'm just having trouble with, like, if we were okay that year and our budget, net spending, which doesn't take into account, the tuition, or it already takes into account the tuition revenue. Like our net spending, and I'm trying to look it up now, went up $400,000 between '23 and '24. I would think that would, and our pupils went down by 10. You would think that would increase more, because the FY '23 was 17.8, which is less than, or more than the 17,221. Like, what percent more? Sorry to be all technical here. I just, it's kind of important. Yeah, so that's 3.3%, so we were already at more than 3%, even if we had the same allowable tuition from FY '23. So what I don't understand is like, if our Act 68 spending went up, our pupils went down, presumably that would mean that allowable tuition would go up.
Well, unless we generated more revenue.
Right.
Than what we expected. But, so do you think, well, again, I need to look at the, the audits then, to get the actual revenue versus what we spent. Would the COVID grants and things like that, because we were paying, using COVID funds for some positions?
Lowers your expenditure budgets. That's why we
That
had
could have helped
surpluses.
us out some.
Well, no, it would hurt us, because our expenditures for those amounts would be less than they naturally would be. And so that's, like, we did wind up
No, I'm
with
saying it
massive
would have helped out
surpluses.
your bottom line those years.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, so that makes some sense to me, that these numbers are artificially low because the COVID spending decreased our spending. And then,
That can make some sense too, coupled with the added revenue
Yeah.
that we weren't budgeting.
because I feel like we've never been even close to our announced tuition
This
in
was
previous years.
This was, yes, surprising
Okay,
that we were
yeah,
over.
yeah, because like, again, since I've been on, we've been like,
So your
setting
actual
up.
revenue versus your budgeted revenue in 24 was 13 million versus, it was 13,400,907. And 24 budgeted was 12,968. So you had more revenue
But
in
that's not a
24. I mean, it's
significant
not
amount.
huge, but
Like, that's
more
not gonna-
revenue, increased enrollment is going to impact your allowable tuition rate.
Right, but again, like, if we do, like, doing the calculation for this year, like, when we had the revised numbers, it was like 21,000 versus the 19,900. So we were like significantly under. And every other year, I remember that generally being the case. And so it makes sense to me that, having $400,000 of positions that we were paying using COVID funds not being counted in.
No,
our
that absolutely
tuition.
could have played a role in that too, as
Yeah.
we're discussing it out loud.
So,
What was the difference? If we overcharge announced versus allowable, we have to pay them back. What about, what, did you say what vice versa was?
So you have to, if you do one, you have to do the other. So if you bill back, if you refund, you also have to bill back. And as a supervisory union, historically,
We haven't done
we
it.
do not bill back our sibling districts within the SU.
Okay. And we don't
didn't-
intend.
didn't- So
to.
we did not require a refund.
Yep.
And we did that this year, or in previous years?
We have never required a refund. or-
When has it happened, though? Like, have we actually ever sent money out?
No, I just said no.
Right, right. Oh, so you're saying the other districts have never asked for money
Correct.
back from us?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Got it.
But they could.
Yeah. Well, what do you guys think after all this?
I think that, I trust Tara and Jamie on this one, that if they feel that the 18.5 is our best bet.
No, I think you could, I mean, that was based off the initial sheet we got. So I don't think we have to stay there now, Nancy. I was more concerned with the first set of figures we ran. I mean, you know, I think now you could set it at 19.9 or a little over 19.9 and be okay. I mean, we were still I mean, those first sets of sheet had us even lower than that 18.5. That was my worry.
Yeah, 16.
I kind of like the idea of helping out our sister districts by keeping it a little lower.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, just going off of last year's, you didn't happen to look those numbers up, did you? The other, like I'm kind of going off the top of my head, but I feel like Randolph is close to 25.
What their announced tuition rates were last year?
Yeah,
24 and change.
yeah, 20, they're
I
close
think
to,
Woodstock is at 22.5.
yeah. Hartford's similar, 22 something. Middlebury's, you know, they're all kind of in that range, so I think,
Woodstock was just a little over 20 because they were, well, I thought Woodstock was just a little over 20. They were closer to us than I expected.
I don't know if I have any battery left.
let's see if I can pull it up. I had it, oh, there it is.
I would like to see, I think 19.9 probably sounds like a good number, keeping it on the 20 mark. But, you know, I'd make a motion to accept 19,900 as our tuition.
Okay? Is there, anybody want to second that?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, I guess the other question is, do we want to, well, so we have a motion on the table for discussion. Do we want to have a single tuition rate or separate out a tuition rate for elementary students as well? I think we only have one elementary tuition student.
Correct.
But that, I could see that one being bill backable, because, you know, even with the updated numbers, we're still, you know, like the allowable tuition calculation came to 16,000 something for, 16,885 for elementary. So I guess that's one question. It doesn't really make much difference in our bottom line, but what's Woodstock's district name?
Mountain
Is it-
View.
What is it?
Or it's Mountain View or Windsor Central, I think it's still listed.
They
So
were
they're,
at 20,000,
273.
273 last year.
Okay,
they're at,
They just announced it 22,510.
so they're at 22,510. That's Woodstock.
These are the ones I've received so far.
U-32 went from 26,694 down to 24,728, so they
Yeah.
did drop by
They
7%.
lowered it. Nice.
Very end went up.
Addison last year was 22.5.
And Barry was at 18.5 last year, and they announced at 19 this year.
19 flat, you said, Barry?
Yep.
That's the only ones I've received so far.
Okay.
And state average for 25 was 19,774.
Oh, okay.
And
So
Pain
not that
Mountain
much.
last year, which is CVSU, that's Williamstown Northfield, was 18.5 last year.
Who is it? Payne?
18.5, Pain Mountain.
What's Hartford, out of curiosity?
Hartford was 22 flat last year.
Hartford, 22 flat. Okay.
I don't have theirs yet.
All right. What do people think about separating out elementary from secondary? What do you think, Ed?
I don't know. Has it helped us or made things more complicated in the past?
I don't think it makes a difference.
I mean, we don't have that many elementary tuition students currently, but that doesn't mean to say we won't get, as, you know, kids are aging up and older siblings are starting to come here. Younger siblings may start to come here from our full tuitioning programs.
I mean, as long as it's not draining a resource, manpower, time.
No, you
anything
can announce
to-
Yeah, to
to-
announce separately, that's not, it's, all my other districts announce separate.
then-
Sorry if
then
that's the
certain-
question.
No, then certainly we should consider making, with the elementary will be lower, so we should be able to stick a lower price tag on it, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think the worry would be we'd be adding extra work if they wind up having build backs or something.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. We can also just leave it just to not worry about it, if we don't care. All right, well, it sounds like nobody has a strong opinion on the matter. Okay, 19.9, everybody happy with that? That would be keeping it flat. You know, if, I'm just looking at, what was our net? If we had it track with our net spending increase, or not net spending, but I guess, yeah, the Act 68 number. Just curious what that went up and what the tuition would, if we did it proportional to that, what it would look like. So it's basically up 5%, well, 5.7%, but if we do a 5% increase over last year, that would be 20,895. I'm happy leaving it at 19.9.
Yep.
Okay.
I really feel lukewarm about it, I thought we were gonna go lower, but
So just looking at what this would do to the budget currently, you know, each $1,000, since the budget currently is using the 18.5 number, each $1,000 is $50,000, which is about half a cent. So this would do about 0.75 cents, I would think, decrease our tax rate, going with 19.9. Okay. Are we ready to vote? Okay. There's a motion on the table to set the tuition rate for elementary and secondary at 19.9. Do a roll call vote. Ed?
nay.
Nay. Nancy?
Yay.
Rodney?
Aye, yay.
And I'm a yay as well. So the motion passes.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't? Oh, because we don't have a
need
quorum,
four.
right? We need 4. All right.
So just so the board realizes, if we can't settle on it tonight, it just stays at what
Stays at 19.9.
it stays at your announced.
Okay.
And our announced is 19.9?
For 25.
For 25, that's where it would stay. So if you don't announce a tuition for 26, it'll stay at your current announced tuition.
So, Ed, would you like to elaborate on?
I
what
just
your
don't
objectives
think that
are?
we need to push it all the way up to the financial threshold. I think for what we gain from this as a community, we have a chance to help out surrounding communities with a little less cost.
Well,
I mean,
would-
we were at 18.5 and now we're back up to 19.9, and the numbers that were,
So we're currently at 19.9. He was recommended to lower it to 18.5.
Originally, because the worksheet had us projected lower, right?
So again, the
and
worksheets,
even $500 would make it 19. All the years back to 19 have either been not raised or raised in increments of 700, which would bring us to 19.2. I mean, this is our biggest increase since 2019.
no, it's not. We're not increasing at all. Again, our current, like, it doesn't say FY '25 on there, but FY '25.
It is, the first paragraph says FY 25.
Right, I just meant in the table,
Yep,
in the
sorry,
table.
at the, what's at the bottom. No, it's in
What's
the
at the
first
But you
bottom?
paragraph.
guys you did increase it by your most.
Last
right,
year.
From last year you did. It took the biggest jump last year.
But, we're not talking about increasing it at all this year. We're talking about it keeping it the same.
And the numbers that Tara was saying that we were actually eligible for were what, 17 and 9 and 11
Yeah, for 24.
for 24?
So that was, but we did the calculation for this year, and it's 21.9. And I think the explanation for what happened in that year was that we were using the COVID funds, which, remember, we had a $700,000 surplus. And that's because we were putting money from the COVID funds to offset regular budget amounts. And we were no longer able to use those for the calculation for allowable tuition. So that's basically a temporary situation that, I mean, at least my guess, my understanding is that that was a temporary situation that applied in FY '24 and maybe '23, but does not apply currently.
Well, I mean, 24, we finalized your audit in 24. I mean, your surplus was 90. Your unassigned fund balance was $212,000 at the close of 24. So you're not up in the 700,000 where you were in 23. So as those COVID funds ended
Right.
in 23, all that extra ARP-ESSER money and all the COVID relief money that came in.
But the FY '24 tuition is based on the FY '23 numbers, which had
Yes,
this
right,
surplus.
right.
Whereas we don't have that surplus this year, so we're not gonna see that same decrease in the allowable tuition from
Well,
what we expected.
but reminder, the other factor, as Jamie said, we're budgeting for 50 tuition students and we could have upwards of 80. Therefore, your enrollment is higher. That impacts your allowable versus your announced tuition, the number of kids in your building,
Yeah, that brings the allowable up or down?
down.
No.
Because it makes your net cost per pupil less.
Right, but
So the allowable is gonna come in lower and lower the more students we have.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's
probably
lower-
never as low as that COVID fund.
Right.
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 But like, if you look at what the calculation that we did just now, or, like the worksheet that we're currently thinking is somewhat accurate for our current situation, it's saying we could basically do 22,000 as our allowable tuition. So, if that gets knocked down 1,000, we're still safe.
Yeah, that's why I said, I think if you use the 19.9, we're safe. I think it's a conservative, safe.
Right.
I don't think I want to come back to you, Ed, saying we owe people. That would be my goal.
And I agree that we should help and I feel like we already are. And that we had set, our tuition, again, we're lower than pretty much everybody in our surrounding area. Like Randolph is 25, and, we're $3,000 less than Addison, and I guess we're close to well, I guess Woodstock's setting it at 22, so, you know, we are lower than all the other options. The question is like, and again, this is just my view, but I'd be willing to go lower if it guaranteed that we got more students, you know, like, I think it'd be great to do an arrangement with our surrounding towns where they designate us, you know, what, they can choose to say, we're gonna pay for the tuition up to the White River Valley tuition number, and then anything above, you know, you have to provide your own funds for. Like, those are arrangements that they could do. So if they wanted to enter an arrangement like that, you know, we could lower our tuition number, get more students, and, you know, come out as a positive. And if we lower it, you know, like, by having, and we have a low number already, but if we lower it too much, then we don't really have the ability to do that, because we couldn't go any lower. Does that make sense? Whereas this gives us a
Yeah.
bargaining tool if the other towns want to do that.
And our tuition students, where do they come from?
Right now, your tuition students for in-person primarily come from First Branch Unified District, Rochester Stockbridge Unified District, Sharon, Stratford. Our collaborative diploma program, we have students coming in from Greater Rutland. We do have kids coming in from Pittsfield, which is a subset of Woodstock, Mountain View.
Granville, Hancock sent students.
So are most of our tuition students also SU students?
Oh, yes, I would, yes, definitely your majority are SU students.
You know, another way I look at it, Ed, is if you look at our budget, you know, our per pupil costs are increasing. And we are not we're not proposing with this motion to increase our tuition amount. So, you know, we could lower it, yes, we could. But to some extent, we have a responsibility to our taxpayers as well. You know, our expenses are going up.
Check that.
And it would make sense, like logically, to increase
Three
the
last year.
tuition rate proportional to the amount our expenses are going up. We are not proposing to do that. So I don't, you know, if there was a benefit beyond goodwill, which I think we already have from our surrounding towns, I could see lowering it further, but anyway. Do you guys have any comments, Rodney or Nancy? So that I'm not the only one talking?
No, I just think I'm good with the 19.9. It just seems like a reasonable number. We could go higher if we wanted to, but I don't know. Or we could go lower, but I just, seems like the middle of the road and a good compromise.
Yeah, I agree, Rodney.
You don't need my vote to announce it, so.
Well, what number would you set? What would you choose? Like, I mean, it'd be nice to be able to have an actual announced tuition, like, otherwise we don't have an announced tuition, and we're just using last year's. And, you know, because of it'd also be nice to have,
I mean, why do we have to go beyond 19.2?
I mean, we don't. It's just, every, you know, like, when we look at the budget, we also could, you know, basically what you're proposing is cutting, so that'd be $700 for 50 pupils. So $35,000 from the budget. But if that's the equivalent of, most of a Paris position. So, I mean, that's the thing, is like, there's revenue attached to this as well. If you think about FBUD's budget, and they have a certain number of students that they're sending to us, this portion of the budget is going to be completely unchanged, right? Every other portion of their budget is going up by 5% or 6% or whatever, but this portion of their budget doesn't change. What you're asking is that we take $35,000 from our budget and put it into their budget instead. And I don't see why we would do that. And if you have a good argument for it, I'm all ears, but
So by not charging them and them paying us a higher amount, it's like us giving them money?
well, right now it's 19.9, right? This
Yeah.
year, we charged them 19.9. If we had this, they billed us for the same exact tuition students next year, and we lower our tuition to 19.2, we have $35,000 less in this year's budget, and they have $35,000 more in this year's budget. So yes, it's the equivalent of us giving them $35,000. I'm simplifying because we're not getting 50 students from FBUD, we're getting them from all over
Right.
the place. But, like, I think it's worth it to be able to say, like, when we get our sheets next time, like $35,000 is 0.03, 0.3 cents. So, at our current one, like the Bethel rate is a little bit going up a little bit more than the Royalton rate is going down. It's like pretty close to equivalent, but it's a little bit more in that direction. We've shaved some small amounts off the budget, and we're gonna have this extra revenue in there. But it'd be really nice to be able to have it be, it's going down 6 cents in Bethel, or in Royalton, and up 4 cents. That's easier to sell than it's going up, down 4 cents and up 5 cents. Like, each little bit matters. And, I don't see that there's a good argument for decreasing it at this point versus just keeping it the same, when there is a benefit to it.
And just so
And it's not like
just to
we're being
remind the
greedy.
board too, our reasoning for recommending the decrease was because the initial tuition sheets that were run had us at a lower announced tuition than the 20,000. So that's why we did it, Ed. Now that we reran the sheets and seeing that 20,000, that's why I said I think you're safe at 19.9. I don't think we're gonna be in a issue where, we may have overcharged somebody.
And,
I'll concede the point. Yay.
well, why don't we I think we need to redo the motion. So, would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we set our announced tuition rate at $19,900.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Well, let's do roll call.
Aye.
Nancy? Aye.
Aye.
Rodney?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Okay, it is passed.
I was gonna mention.
Thank you.
On Ed's point, that $35,000, I liked that Andrew said that could be another para. Whereas that $35,000 split between all of those sending schools would be nickels and dimes. So it's not gonna really save any of them all that much money. But for us, it could mean, another para position, so.
You wanna do the other action item?
Yeah.
Before we go?
So, Winooski Valley Agreement for School Choice.
So we have historically, at least the last few years, set our Winooski Valley numbers that we would agree to accept no more than 15 students and send no more than 10. 10 is the minimum, by the way. We have to at least allow 10 out. Right now, just a second and I'll pull it up.
And as a summary, there's no money exchanged with these.
Correct.
We don't change ADMs, it's just we have another person in our building. Or not in our building, as the case may be.
We have 5 students in. And for 23, 24. Oh, sorry, did I just grab the wrong file? I apologize. What are we in right now? 24, 25? Yeah, you have one too. Should have had it ready while you guys were talking. I apologize.
Should we have talked for longer?
I got it. I just found it. Sorry, 6 in, and we have, it looks like to me 5 ended up going out.
Okay.
If it isn't broke, don't fix it. 15 and 10 still sounds reasonable if that's the levels coming in and out.
Yeah, it's not like we've created a wait list or
Yeah.
on either end, so.
Seems like everybody's getting what they want.
You wanna
People
make a
that
motion?
want to come here are coming, and people that are going are getting to go, so.
Do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to keep the Willaski exchange rate the same,
Second,
15 in and out.
I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Then, Rodney,
Aye.
Nancy? How do you vote, Nancy?
Aye.
Ed?
Aye.
I'm aye as well, so we are in agreement on that. It's passed.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to the discussion on the proposed building project Phase 2. We won't be taking any more action, so we don't absolutely need you here, Nancy, but we would love for you to stay.
I'd like to go.
Okay?
See you guys later.
Okay, so, for the Phase 2 building project, we've had a couple of, facilities board meetings where we talked with EEI and, looked for ways that we could save money on the project and also different ways that we could structure things. There was, they looked at a way to kind of change the scope of the project to kind of rearrange. It would basically be using the same footprint, but trying to make the performance space be in where the rehearsal space was and rehearsal space where the stage was, to kind of make it so that there'd be an official auditorium, but it didn't really work with the spacing that was provided there. So we also looked at other ways to save money, like lowering the roof line in the rehearsal space to be a little lower than what the elementary gym was, or, you know, if we change the footprint to maybe not go all the way over and have as much storage space. Looking at what those would do to the budget. So Eric's on this call, and hopefully he'll have some numbers for us here that we can look at.
How you doing? Sorry about that.
Eric's a little under the weather
we did-
too, I'll just add. Thank you for joining with us, Eric.
Yeah, no worries.
Appreciate that.
Everybody can hear me, right?
Yep.
Sorry for not being in person today. So we did get a chance to meet as a facilities group, and we did present some of those options, as Andrew had mentioned. I do have an updated presentation for today, which is really similar to the presentation that I presented a few months ago. In all, you know, the biggest, what we were looking at, and I'll try to show it on here and explain it a little bit more. But this is the current design that failed the bond vote back in November. And what Andrew's referring to is the recycle space really kind of ends right here at this window. And the space back here is really the instructional, the one-on-one space, the office space, and the equipment storage. So the two options that we looked at was really reducing this kind of corridor and some additional storage space that was coming off the back of the your guys' new gymnasium, as you guys call it, and at the end of the recital hall, and then lowering the height of this ceiling over here, and then actually just lowering the overall height of the building as well. Because it is a little bit bigger than what you would typically see in a music, a band practice space. We had total reductions of the square footage amounted to $178,000. And the reduction of the height amounted to $63,000. So total savings between the two were just shy of $250,000. And after kind of having discussions with the owner or with the group, we felt that, you know, really cutting any storage out of the space would probably not be a great idea, just because there's already a lack of storage in the existing gym and the new gym as it is. And that was pretty relevant when I walked through it last with Steven. They actually have, you know, the stage being right now is being used as storage for the indoor track space. And I think really reducing any amount of storage by eliminating the existing gym would not be a great idea. Ultimately, we didn't have any great options for reducing the overall cost that wasn't going to impact the scope pretty significantly. And I think the group kind of decided that they wanted to go back with something very similar to what they had before. The one option that was kind of discussed pretty heavily was to really kind of take out the upgrades to the existing gym. On the first bond vote or budget, we carried $350,000, and that was really for the lighting and audio upgrades to the gym, as well as some improvements to the seating area. After discussions with, I think, the last group and the arts committee, they felt pretty confident that they could raise funds specifically for that upgrade. So one thought was really just eliminating that $350,000 out of the budget and really, you know, relying on the community to do upgrades. And some of the things that we kind of pointed out as some specifics that we can fundraise towards, specifically is the auditorium seating. So that would be kind of a rolled out stage seating that normally would be up against the wall, similar to what you have here, except for it would go up about 6 or 7 different flights here essentially, and each seat would have a back on it and padded seats. So it actually swivels on like a 90-degree, and it would come out into the middle of the gym floor here. We talked about painting and drywall, acoustical upgrades to the perimeter of the gym. So one issue that you have, especially on the stage, is that the sound has a tough time transferring out to the actual auditorium. So creating some sound shells and then really directing the sound out to where the actual patrons are. HVAC improvements, so actually providing a dedicated ventilation system with dehumidification for the gym to improve the actual experience when people are inside of there. But there were some aspects of it, like the elevator lift, that we just knew had to happen one way or the other. So all in all, most of the other parts of the project stayed the same, including the wood shop, the retro commissioning to the controls. And originally, last November bond vote, you guys had a total project budget of $6,757,000. If you guys remove the actual existing gym upgrades, that would put you below 6.5 million at 6.4 million. But it doesn't necessarily eliminate that work, it just kind of shifts the cost responsibility off of the fundraising group. Overall project schedule wouldn't, we would have to shift everything back by about 4 to 5 months. So ideally, we would be breaking ground end of summer, beginning of fall of this coming year of 2025, with the goal of having that space open back up for the school year of 2026. With completion of the overall project essentially by fall of 2026. So you'd be looking at just over probably about 14 to 15 months of overall construction time.
Okay. So the updated, like, we talked about not removing the the storage space for that, but the reductions in the ceiling height, is that still an option? That would be 60-something thousand dollars?
Yeah, it's about 63,000 to reduce the height over there, and it changes a little bit of the construction from the structural steel, so.
Okay. Was that lowering it all the way, kind of on the, like exactly which, was that just reducing the height of the whole thing by like 3 feet, or?
No, it wasn't, so it was reducing the overall height by a couple feet, but then really reducing the height of this addition over here. And
Sure.
what it does is we were changing the style of construction. So this is the connector corridor, Andrew.
We can't see this.
Eric, we
yet.
can't see your screen, buddy.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go.
Mine,
Yep, now we can.
Okay, sorry. This is the connector corridor that would essentially connect your secured entrance to the new secured entrance to
Yep.
the Performing Arts Center. This ceiling height here is about 12 feet. The proposed is, I believe it was just over 22 feet is what the existing proposed is. So we'd be cutting about 10 feet of height out of here and really changing the actual construction. So this is a steel beam construction. We would go with a structural framing member, and then we would do the same over here. I think the 65,000 was less than what I had originally anticipated, but it would allow us to, still maintain some of these architectural features that Matt really didn't want to VE out of the project, being that it's the front of the building.
Sure. Is changing from the steel, like, which is generally more expensive, the steel construction or whatever the other one that you mentioned?
Yeah, it was more the fact that we're, kind of bringing more trades in, so there's additional bid packages and stuff. The overall, there was a lot of stuff that didn't change by reducing that square footage. I think we were looking more at kind of a proportional deduction. I think we were looking closer to, 400,000 in savings, roughly 10%, and it came in, quite a bit less than that. And I think there was a lot of questions, people really didn't want to get rid of the storage.
Yeah.
But I think reducing the height was something that I don't think people were overly concerned about.
Okay. But the numbers that you had there didn't include that, but wouldn't make that much
They
difference.
did not, no.
Right. Okay.
So then I think the other question the board has is, we're feeling confident that we're gonna be able to hopefully hit some more fundraising. We're reaching out to those folks to try to get a confirmation, is whether you still carry the 350 number. And frankly, we know we're still gonna need to fundraise to do some more upgrades, hopefully above the 350 number. Or do we rely on fundraising to, improve the current gym space?
Yeah, and so
The task force didn't decide that. It was just, that was the only place we had conversation around. We felt like we could still do some more fundraising to outfit that space, but the question is, do you want to still carry it also? And
right. So one of the things that seemed to be an issue during the bond vote was that people generally thought, there were certainly some people who thought that we were talking about a performing arts center, which sounded more than what we were proposing, which is mostly just rehearsal space. So, one of the things that this might enable us to do is just make it clear that this is we're just paying for the rehearsal space and not for a performing arts center, like full fancy upgrade. So I could see that being a benefit of just having just the expansion part and the entrance improvements being part of the bond. And it would lower the overall number. So when will we be able to get updating renderings of what the lowered ceiling looks like compared to what this one looks like?
I would say by midweek. I was actually hoping that we would have it today.
Yeah.
But I think they also ran into some sicknesses in their office as well. But they're working on interior render of the fund purposes for the old gym, for the existing gym. And then they're gonna hopefully provide interior renderings for the Performing Arts Center as well, with the updated exteriors, with the lowered roofs.
Right, rehearsal space. And did you have a chance to look at all about like modular construction for the shop expansion? If there's any other ways of reducing that cost?
I did not, I mean, I wouldn't, I don't think we could necessarily go modular construction. I think that we could potentially cut some of the cost by just not going as, I would rather not, just being the type of space that it is, that's a shop. Some of the things that, that I was thinking about was, the exhaust systems and makeup air that's needed for the welding booths. The overhead garage doors, we want to build a new overhead garage doors. I just think that that wasn't a huge budget. I want to say that was
325, I think.
385,000.
385, yeah.
Honestly, Andrew, I did not look into that one as much, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't think but after originally looking at that, there's not a whole lot to cut in that.
You guys have any thoughts at this point? No, I think next meeting, we're gonna have to figure out what we want to request for the bond. And we'll need to know kind of what we wanna say is the total project cost and what we want to have the bond request be. So this, it seems like the cost matrix isn't changing particularly much, so we need to decide how we would distribute things. When we were putting together the package last time, we saved basically $500,000 in the reserve fund. We could increase the amount we're using from the reserve fund. We have more solid commitment. We don't have a final number yet for what kind of the fundraising side of things would be. But with a more solid commitment, we could basically probably count on the original gym upgrades all being paid for by new fundraising.
In addition to our original.
Right, in addition to the original fundraising. So that could mean that like the Byrne Foundation, $500,000 goes exclusively to the rehearsal space.
And the additional fundraising pays for the upgrades to the gym.
Right. So, where that puts us as far as an overall number, I think we need to look at that.
Yeah, because we can get that drafted.
Yeah, we gotta get that drafted. What are your guys' thoughts as for what our direction should be? I guess Nancy's not here. Rodney, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I mean, changing the building and you're saving about 63,000, and other than that, you're just talking about getting more fundraising. Well, whether you subtract it out of the original budget or just say we're gonna get more fundraising, it's the same thing. I don't know,
Well, we could remove that ECM from the whole project. So it would lower the price of what people are voting on by that 350. If that's what you chose to do.
Right.
right. But I don't, we don't, if the fundraising is not guaranteed, that's the only thing, but.
No, but I think it's pretty solid at this point. And if it didn't happen, then like we just wouldn't do that part of the project. So,
Right,
you know, which definitely needs to get done, but, you know, I think that that's, you know, it is something that could make it more motivating for the fundraising as well. You know, like I think part of the issue with the fundraising the first time around is we were just kind of saying, like, it wasn't going towards something specific, it was just kind of help us, you know, when it was just kind of like going towards the bond amount is the way it was, seemed like the first time around. So, you know, having it go towards specific things makes it easier to, you know, raise that money.
Yeah, so your article before was for 3,800,000. I mean, you could conceivably have it be 3 million minus the 350 plus the 60.
Right, so that was with 6.7 total cost
Right?
and 1.8, it was 1.8 from the reserve, or was it 1.7?
I just had the warning up. I didn't
Yeah, I need to find that sheet.
I didn't pull the resolution up.
Yeah. So it's 3.8, 1.8, we had $6,000 in grants, essentially. Should pull up that, the website. That'd be the
6.8 total.
Yeah, 1.7.
1.7 from reserve?
But I had a note here for you.
Well, just give that to Andrew.
That was the flyer that went out. I
Here's your
was just
flyer.
looking
Is
for
that
my-
helpful?
Yeah.
Here we go.
That's what I'm looking for.
So capital reserve was 1.7, and private funding donation pledge campaign was 1.2, for a total of 3.857 on the ECN research that I sent to the bond bank and to the attorneys.
Okay. Yeah, so just trying to think like what we, because the, 1.3. So if we decrease the total project to 3.4, essentially, 6.4, sorry. What do people think about dedicating more of the bond, more of the reserve fund to the bond? Like going up from 1.7 to something more than that? Oh, and the other thing that we should discuss is that there was $200,000 of unallocated funds, probably should have discussed this around the budget, that either should go to lowering the tax rate or to the reserve fund that could be used for this as well. That would be about 2 cents for the tax rate or $200,000 for the bond.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, just based on the fundraising, if we remove the 350, based on what we were counting on fundraising for revenue, I'm just a little worried we could come up short with not having.
What do you mean?
When you guys originally planned, were you planning between grants and fundraising to get the 1.1? I mean,
Yeah.
that's banking on a $600,000 grant, which we won't know about until March now. If we know
Right.
that we're gonna put the other fundraising toward outfitting the gym, that just makes me a little worried.
Right, but initially we were, we were at like, we'd already put in more. Like the initial thing, when you totaled up all the sources, it was 7.4 million.
Okay,
And we had 6.8,
got it.
so that basically wasn't.
That makes me feel better.
Right. So I'm trying to think, like, if we, and the other thing is, I think we could probably lower it further, you know, if we had private fundraising for the private practice rooms, say, or, you know, some aspects of the rehearsal room as well, which maybe isn't likely, but I don't know. I think we probably could do that as well. and should look to, I think that would be a good idea. Sorry, probably should have been more prepared coming in. So if we ask the voters to take the $200,000 that we currently have and put that towards the reserve fund, the reserve fund is essentially at $2 million right now. So we could increase the amount of reserves that we're doing from 1.7 to 2 million, have $200,000 still in our reserve fund, plus the transfers that are happening.
Which we just reduced 40,000.
I know. But we'd had 250,000 essentially at the end of that, because we're rounding. So let's see, if we did that, and we have $500,000 for the burn. So 6.4 minus 0.5 minus 2 minus 0.6, that would take us down to 3.3 if we got the grant, full grant, which I do think we should have some leeway for that, you know. I guess the question is, like, we're gonna need to be prepared to set a number that we wanna ask for next time. If we go to $2 million and basically get all of the fundraising and grants that we're expecting, we could lower it to 3.3. It was 3.8.
And nothing's being taken out.
Nothing's being taken out. Yeah, we could lower it a little bit. I mean, nothing's taken out as in what we expect to actually happen. We could lower the total project cost by removing the,
We're just baking on some fundraising and grant, so if that didn't come through, it wouldn't leave you much in your reserve, and then we'd have to be doing deducts.
right,
But in the end, the kids get everything that was here.
right.
We're not eliminating anything by making those moves, we're just banking on fundraising.
Well, by lowering your bond requests, what I just said, was that if all the fundraising, like, let's say that we don't get the $600,000 COPS grant, right? And we come up short with fundraising, we will have to deduct because we're banking on those things happening.
Right. You know, I think if we didn't get the fundraising, then certainly we need to deduct what we're
The gym
asking
upgrades.
for anyway. Like, the grants, I don't know. It would be nice to have a better sense of,
I have no sense.
yeah.
Nothing.
So I mean.
And what we presented last time was essentially 3.8, and we'd be going to 3.3.
Right. But we could also go to 3.5 or 3.4 or, you know.
Well, I mean,
3.6, or we
I'll
keep
be
it.
honest with, my first thought is they didn't go for 3.8. I don't think 3.3 is enough. I mean, my opinion is that it was a bad vote anyway. I don't think 3.8, the 3.3 is going to change the minds of the people that stood in the way of it previously. So my inclination is to not start dipping into different channels. I've been clear about that. I liked what we had to begin with, and the closer what we end up with is to what we had to begin with, the happier I'm gonna be with how this turned out. And I've spoken to people, and that's the general consensus I've gotten from the folks I've spoken to too.
Rodney, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't think we're changing it enough to really, you know, going from 3.8 to 3.3, it's just not a huge difference. If they won't pass 3.8, they won't pass 3.3. I just don't think it's that much of a difference.
So are you saying you'd rather just ask for the
Shifting
3.8?
money around, taking more out of the reserve fund, I don't like that. I just,
Would you rather just stick with the 3.8 then, or are you thinking that we need to make more major changes?
I don't think there are major changes. We either do it or don't do it, but it's not, I don't see where we can do anything to really make it a real, to really get the cost down. I mean, you know, you'd have to get it under 3 million at least. You know, get it down in twos to make it look different. And I don't think that's possible. And some of the fundraising and grants aren't even guaranteed, so I don't know. I'm struggling with it, to be real supportive of it.
I mean, I guess my other question would be, is it possible to have multiple bonds? Like if we had basically the entrances and the rehearsal space as one bond and the ventilation and, you know, some of these other things as a second bond?
You'd have to go through the same process for both bonds. You'd have to have the scope of work, and you'd have to go for the same, so you'd have two different warnings, two different project
Right, I know,
prospects,
but like-
resolutions. So that would be the steps that would be necessary if we did something like that.
And is it possible to do half the project? I mean, if you're gonna just leave it half finished or something, I don't see how that would work.
Well, no, it's more like we would be voting, so like in that case, like they would approve the ventilation separately from the, you know, the library or the whatever, other parts of it. So, you know, you'd have $600,000 or, you know, $1 million basically of the other things that aren't the rehearsal space that would be approved separately. And if that vote didn't go down through, then you do the parts that did pass and try and figure out those other parts some other way. I'm just, you know, brainstorming here.
Yeah, I just don't see that working well myself, but
Okay.
I don't know. That's just me.
I do worry about confusion
Yeah.
and people wondering why we did it that way and
Yeah.
assuming that.
And I don't,
I don't know if they would
feel,
assume
I don't
good
feel
intent
inclined to
with it.
pick it apart to create, more clarity. I think people already didn't have clarity, and I don't think the clarity will get any clearer by pulling this apart and doing it in sections. I think that'll just confuse them even more.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess we'll, I mean, why don't you guys think about what you would like to see for next time? You know, it seems like you guys are mostly talking about just doing the same thing, going to the vote with the same exact numbers. I do think I think it would go better if we made some modifications. I realize we can't make large modifications, but it does seem like going back for the same vote again. I think that could turn off some people who, you know, supported the project initially, or, you know, were not completely anti the project, but like just wouldn't appreciate the process of just keep trying until you get it, you know, like.
I think it's hard to even know. We had such a
I
poor
agree, it's
turnout
hard
for
to-
the vote, and it was such a poor representation.
Well, that's wrong. We did not have a poor turnout. That was the best turnout that's there ever been for any bond vote.
Well, for that kind of money, how many voters are in Royalton? How many are in Bethel? And how many people decided this?
We had
And then we had a margin of
270
10.
people vote on the bond that was for the highway expansion or paving.
I understand. And because there's poor participation in other bond votes, we're supposed to excuse this? 10 people decided out of 700
right,
something, and we're
sure.
talking about thousands of voters. So basically, if,
I'm just trying to be realistic here. We're not going to get 2,000 people out to vote. Like 1,500 was more than has voted in any, like, we did a great job getting people out. Or maybe it was just because it was the time that it happened.
we
to be.
did a great job getting people out, I agree. But you know who else did a great job getting people out? people with misinformation
Sure.
and axes to grind against the project. And they actually did a better job than us by 10 people.
The only, like I said, the only thing you could think about as a board, I mean, I would suggest if you were gonna lower the cost, you look at your ECMs and pick an ECM.
Right, and just remove it.
Yeah.
Right.
Rather than changing over.
The,
And we can't do that with the stormwater improvements,
right.
but like, yeah, any of those other things could
The
be.
other thing we should look at tonight while we're here, just because we need to have warnings drafted, is when we would want to actually hold our informational meeting.
Well, we only have 3 people, which isn't gonna give us a,
No, but we could propose a date and I could
Yeah.
email, because we
Yeah,
can
that sounds
discuss
good.
that without violating open meeting laws.
Yeah, we just have to have all that detail for the attorneys to draft up the warnings and the resolutions.
and does it have to be in the like week before? Or what's the?
Within 10 days,
Within
just
10
like,
days.
Yep.
now, we typically have 2
Yeah.
informational
Do
meetings,
that
so
again.
I think we could line it up and have it be on the same night we do one of the budget informational meetings.
Yep. All right, so Tuesday is the 4th, so 10 days from Tuesday would be 1, 2, 3, 4. I should actually open this calendar.
Valentine's Day?
Perfect. Is that right? So 7,
Should we do the
no,
week
it's
of
like
the
the
24th?
21st or something.
Is that break? It is, isn't it?
It is, yep. And so I'm gonna be out of town that whole week, just as an FYI, but, you know, we have to do it that week. So, doesn't matter to me what day.
Can we do the next?
That's our annual meeting.
Because we have to
And
do
you
the
could,
annual
we
meeting.
could, you could hold your annual meeting and then have an informational meeting afterwards.
It's not a bad idea. Have that be the warned one.
You could, yeah.
That's a good idea. And then we could do supplemental ones the
You have your
previous
2
weeks.
regular budget informational meetings that we do anyways.
Yeah. And we're gonna,
You could
we're
roll
gonna
it.
be talking about this during the annual meeting.
Yeah, so when do you usually do your annual meeting, what, at 6?
I think so.
Yep.
How long does it typically go?
I mean, an hour.
So we could, to be safe, we could warn the informational, for the warning at 7:30 on the bond vote.
Yep. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and, you know, we're gonna have a meal there, and, you know, maybe we could have like,
I don't think 7:30 is too late.
no. We could warn it, or not warn it, but have like it advertised as you get your meal beforehand, and then we'll have some pie afterward or something
Yeah,
like
we could
that.
have pie. No, right, in case the
We just
meeting
won't-
ends.
I like
We'll
pie.
need to-
We won't be there, but
Right,
it is what
yeah.
it is. One of us maybe.
We'll have pie, though.
We have 3 votes that night that
Right.
we're navigating again, but we'll figure it out.
Okay. No, that's a good idea.
I just thought that too.
You as a board handle your budget well, so I don't get as, like, you can walk people through it very well, and not every board can do it at the level that you're able to as a board.
Yeah. Okay. Well, does anybody else want to say anything before we, so we'll have that be the warned one. Next meeting, we need to pick 2 informational ones that will be earlier, prior to break, to talk about both the
We
budget
don't need
and
that for
the
their
bond
warning,
vote.
so that's fine.
Nope, just for agendas. In our mailers.
Yep. All right, so we're gonna craft that warning with that night being the informational meeting for the bond.
Okay.
I mean, you're gonna get your best turnout.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good way of
I
satisfying.
think we do the same thing in Sharon.
And, you know, we're gonna be talking about it anyway.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, is there any way to have it warned just at the same time as the annual meeting, and we just talk about it as part of our
I
presentation?
think we just ask if we can do
I
that
can
as an
ask.
article. It'd be nice if we could.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind doing it as like a separate
I
thing,
think
but
we
it's a
have to
little
have
silly.
the separate it has to have its own warning. So we can't have it as an article on our main warning
Right.
for the annual meeting. But I wonder if we could do it for the same time.
We'll just check.
Yeah, I'll find
Yeah,
out
and I
from our
guess,
attorney.
and there is kind of the like legal requirements for what happens during the annual meeting. Like,
There is, yeah.
Does this count as a report of the board? That,
Yep.
so maybe we do need it as a separate.
I think we just want it separate, probably. It's cleaner.
Yeah, I'll verify it all, how we need to do it to be the best.
Okay,
And then we just need a number for it, and I need a new ECM matrix.
I'll get you that. Right now, I'm hearing 3.8. I haven't heard that changed.
I have not heard that change yet either.
Okay.
I think we'll discuss it.
We'll be ready to adjust if we need
Yes,
to then.
we
right?
can adjust it if we need to. Okay,
Okay,
It's the
I'm
same
gonna go
matrix.
now, I guess, we're pretty much done discussing everything, right?
well, we've got public comment. You should see if there's any public comment.
We don't have a quorum, we're not gonna have an official meeting now.
No, but I think we're done with the discussion. We do have one member of the public here, so,
Just more constructive comment or
sure,
suggestion than anything.
go ahead.
And I'll be quick, I know it is late, so, I made a note here just about the adjustable height, but I think that that's kind of off the table at this point. I was just gonna mention, if you're going through a $3.5 million project, $60,000 additional square footage, when you're talking about 20, 30 years in the future, we don't know what that space might be used for, so I just don't think that's wise to eliminate it,
Sure.
that's my opinion. Again, I think it's off the table. To Ed's point, you know, that reduction, that $300,000, it's not huge with public messaging, you know, it's still a $3 million project, right? So I don't think that changes a lot of minds out there, but I think if you coupled it with some messaging, it really could make an impact, because like you mentioned, it's not just the same thing. We didn't just not do anything. And I mean, the town didn't discuss it. Nobody came up with any better ideas. No change was made. I think if you don't take it out of that actual proposed amount, if you were to say part of this discussion was that part of this project really could be fundraising. And so we're acknowledging that, and we have some commitment to raise those additional funds to cover that portion of it. That messaging, along with the fact that this meeting even happened, you know, it's really hard to get that out there. The fact that those discussions are happening makes it seem like you're considering the impact of having a discussion. You know, there's nobody online, you know, nobody's seeing that happen. So they don't even know that you said, what's the impact of that? It's 300,000, we're putting that on somebody else, it might not happen, and then we have a failure here or we don't. That sort of messaging is important. So I think as you move closer to March, that's really, really important. Whether you take it out of that budget or not, even if you mention the fact, I think that would be huge. We talked about this, we really stressed it, we tried to figure out a better option, and this really is where we're at. So if we can get rallied commitment, but we do have to get this thing passed, and we promise to work with these parties and try to figure out that fundraising. But really, on the other side of that though, that risk to those gym upgrades, if you were to take it out, that's something that can happen later. A lot of these other things I mentioned at the last meeting, informational meeting, they're interdependent, and it seems like that one really isn't. So if you were to go down this ECM list here and pick one that wasn't, or that could be sort of taken out of that bottom line, that's kind of the only target, because it's not so dependent. Even the shop upgrades, they really are dependent, because you're talking about the tank that's in that same area, right? So that seemed important to me.
When you
And
say
then-
that, you mean ECM 4 up there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. And then the other thing I just underlined, again, I've already used 4.5 minutes, but you've said it like 15 times, which is really important, rehearsal space. Any messaging that goes out from here on should not be Performing Arts Center. Because I said it before, my giant high school, Performing Arts Center, it was a building, bigger than our high school. And to me, Performing Arts Center, when I read it, I'm picturing a stadium, I'm picturing a stage with a nice new PA and acoustics, and I'm not picturing what it really is, which is storage and a couple of practice rooms, rehearsal rooms. So that messaging is huge, and then also, because I do believe it's important, and, you know, publicly I will say, you know, I think this is an important project and I support it. The other thing is all this messaging on Facebook or wherever else it's gonna go. Facebook is the battleground for this, let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
So when things are getting put out, if we use those beautiful renderings that somebody spent a lot of time on, they look great. A lot of people are gonna see that and go, well, la-ti-da, we don't need, look at that giant building. It's great for selling it, but not to the people that don't want it or think that it's superfluous, you know? So I think if you were to put more simplified messaging out there, imaging out there, and then say, but here's a link to the SU website if you want more information or to see the renders. The people who support it, who are gonna tell their friends to make sure they come out and go, they're gonna click on that link, they're gonna look at the renders, they're gonna say, wow, what a great way to spend this money. It's great for our kids, it's great for our future, it's great for our town. They're gonna tell their buddies, here's the link, hopefully, right? You get more support from your side, get that better turnout. And the people that are either on the fence or think it's a terrible idea, they're not seeing that image and saying, look at that thing. They're just seeing, okay, school building, necessary improvements, necessary building projects that have to happen, stormwater, you know, those things that we don't have a choice. They're not seeing Performing Arts Center and then seeing a render of a building that in the render looks twice as big. I mean, it's just, it looks great, but to the person that's opposed to it, that looks twice the size of our high school. So that's all I wanted to say. 5.5 minutes, that's not bad.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.